the vampires that were written about in the 19th century, Dracula and Carmilla, the principal big vampire characters, they were objects of horror and revulsion, but the authors who wrote about them also made them very mysterious and very glamorous. And the novel and the short story Carmilla, the novel Dracula and the short story Carmilla, are really obsessed with the mystery of those characters. So it's not surprising to me that as we went into the 20th, we began to explore that mystery. I mean, anybody who watches the original Dracula is going to kind of fall in love with Bela Lugosi. He's repulsive, but he's charming and comical. And other Universal horror movies that were made early in the century about supernatural characters began to ask us to have pity for those characters and to become involved with them. The Wolf Man is a very outstanding example, with Lon Chaney Jr., who was so miserable about turning into a wolf. Just such suffering. It was incredible. And then the Frankenstein movies that were made by Universal, where the monster was such an object of pity and suffered so much. All of that was fascinating. So when I came along, and well, I took my cue from a 1934 movie, Dracula's Daughter, in which Dracula's daughter was presented as this beautiful countess who was a painter living in London, and she was agonizing over being a vampire. So I, in a way, inherited that in popular culture, the idea that this mysterious person had a tragic dimension. And I had inherited a kind of identification with that character. All I did was really open that up in a much broader way. I just said up front, I don't care about the victims, I want to write about the interesting ones, the vampires. So I'm going to make the novel from their point of view, and they're going to talk to you about what they suffer, which is far more interesting than what the victim suffers. But it was an expansion. It was an expansion of what was already there. If you go back and read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it's all right there in that novel. Now, I didn't read that novel until the 1990s, so I had already written a number of vampire novels before I read it. But I was astonished to see that everything was there in that novel. The monster has a big hunk of the novel to himself where he tells us his story. And we understand how badly he suffers when Frankenstein just abandons him. And we understand how terribly he's rebuffed by the mortals that he tries to make contact with. And no wonder he becomes murderous and angry and goes after Frankenstein and insists that he make him a mate. You know, it's all right there, what exploded in the 20th, the sympathetic monster. But surely it has something to do with our freedom in the 20th century, our complete secular freedom to identify with a total rebel, a vampire, a wolf man, a mummy, or whatever, you know, a monster. And that's part of the 20th century's great triumph, that we were able to do that. We were able to throw off the shackles of a revealed religion, and we were able to write a fiction that could give itself over totally to the idea that we could get with the monster, understand the monster, and that we are the monster. That the monsters of our psyche are in fact metaphors for us and for the dilemma in which we find ourselves.